Police discovered Kelly's body in Grand Prairie, less than a mile from Acosta Ferguson's home.
I wanted to know that she was not alone, that we are going to remember her.
This is Kayla Kelly, a 33-year-old McKinney woman whose burned SUV was found on a remote dirt road in Frisco, Texas. And the person who torched her vehicle wasn't some random stranger. It was the man she'd been dating for months. And when she finally discovered the truth that he'd tried to keep hidden and threatened to expose him, he made sure she'd never tell anyone, even if it meant ending her life in the most gruesome way possible. Before we uncover how a seemingly normal relationship turned into a calculated murder, let me take you back to the summer of 2022, where two people met online and one of them had no idea she was walking into a deadly web of lies. Kayla worked at Raytheon in Tarrant County, and those who knew her described her as outgoing and trusting. She met someone online who introduced himself as Kevin Brown. They started dating, texting constantly, building what she thought was a real connection. Friends later told investigators she was serious about the relationship, even when loved ones expressed concerns. But Kevin Brown didn't exist. The man she was dating was actually Oxter Siobhan Ferguson, a 32-year-old Jamaican national who lived in Grand Prairie with his wife, Latrina Chandler. Ferguson had married Chandler back in 2018 after meeting her during her vacation in Jamaica. He presented himself as a former preacher and Sunday school teacher, someone devoted to his faith and community. What Kayla didn't know was that Ferguson wasn't just lying to her about his name and marital status. He was running multiple relationships simultaneously. Prosecutors would later present evidence showing Ferguson exchanged messages with 11 different women, with 213 pages of text conversations admitted during trial. His wife knew about his infidelity but seemed to excuse it. During her testimony, Chandler described their marriage as one marked by suspicions of cheating, but she attributed it to his age, saying he was young and people cheat. While his wife was making excuses for his behavior back home, Ferguson was spinning elaborate lies to keep multiple women believing they were in exclusive relationships with him. And Kayla had fallen for it completely. By early January 2023, something shifted. Kayla discovered the truth. She found out that Kevin Brown was actually Oxter Ferguson, that he was married, and that everything he told her was a fabrication. And Kayla decided to blackmail him, which she informed her friends about. Now, investigators believe this likely meant she was planning to expose his lies rather than demand money. But either way, Ferguson knew his double life was about to crashing down. What happened next would unfold with terrifying speed. On the night of January 9th into January 10th, 2023, Kayla and Ferguson were at her apartment in McKinney. At around 2:29 in the morning, Kayla grabbed Ferguson's phone and started sending messages to the women in his contacts, including his wife. The texts were straightforward and devastating. "This is his girlfriend. He also has a wife. I know, I'm just as shocked as you." She sent these messages to 6 or 7 women, exposing Ferguson's web of deception in real time. And within 2 hours of sending those messages, everything changed. Cell phone data and surveillance footage showed only Kayla's car, and Ferguson's phone left her apartment complex that morning. Ferguson drove to a Walmart where he purchased a gas can and a lighter, paying with cash. He then stopped at a gas station to fill up the can with fuel. But before any of that happened, something horrific had already happened inside Kayla's apartment. Dr. Stacy Murphy, the medical examiner from Tarrant County, would later testify about what she found during the autopsy. Kayla died from asphyxiation. Her thyroid cartilage was fractured and there were uneven injuries around her neck, suggesting she'd been suffocated with some kind of object. The injuries ruled out any natural causes or accidental death. The medical examiner dismissed defense theories about autoerotic asphyxiation, pointing out there was no associated equipment, no signs this happened accidentally, and the asymmetrical injuries were inconsistent with self-inflicted harm. Someone had deliberately cut off Kayla's oxygen supply until she died. Then Ferguson transported her nude body to a wooded area less than half a mile from his Grand Prairie residence. He buried her face down in a shallow grave, covering her hastily with dirt and foliage. No clothing, jewelry, or anything that could identify her quickly. It was a deliberate attempt to hide what he'd done. And here's where Ferguson's arrogance became his downfall. While standing at or near the gravesite where he just buried Kayla's body, he sent texts to her phone, messages like "baby, where you at?" and questions about lunch. He was trying to create an alibi, Messages that would make it look like he was concerned about her whereabouts, like he had no idea what happened to her. Texas Ranger Thomas Fitzpatrick later called this a critical misstep. The timestamps and location data from these texts placed Ferguson exactly where Kayla's body was buried, at exactly the time she was being disposed of. After burying Kayla, Ferguson drove her SUV to a deserted county road in Frisco.
And it is on this road where court documents say 32-year-old Ocastra Ferguson dumped Kayla Kelly's vehicle and set it on fire.
Then Ferguson did something that showed just how calculated he was. He created a new Lyft account and arranged a ride back to his home in Grand Prairie, back to the house he shared with his wife, as if nothing had happened. For 3 days, nobody knew where Kayla was. Her coworkers at Raytheon started getting worried when she didn't show up for work. This wasn't like her. She was reliable, dedicated to her job. When she missed multiple shifts without any communication, alarm bells went off. On January 11, 2023, Kayla's aunt and coworkers reported her missing to authorities. The investigation moved quickly once law enforcement got involved. They started tracing her digital footprint, pulling phone records, checking surveillance footage, and what they found pointed them directly to Ferguson.
Authorities tell us they found Ferguson's car parked outside of Kayla Kelly's apartment right here in McKinney. They also found her burned out car in Frisco on an empty county road, but no signs of her.
The SUV was torched beyond recognition, clearly an attempt to eliminate evidence. But investigators also found Ferguson's own vehicle parked outside Kayla's McKinney apartment.
Authorities say in Ferguson's car, quote, a search warrant was conducted on the vehicle, and gloves, duct tape, and a blanket were located in the vehicle.
The phone records told an even darker story. Kayla's phone was last used at 6:59 p.m. on January 10th. The last location ping came from the area of Ferguson's workplace in Dallas. After that, the phone went dark. But NTTA toll records showed something interesting. Kayla's vehicle traveled north on the Dallas North Tollway into Frisco. Ferguson's phone pinged in the area of Kayla's burned vehicle, and surveillance footage captured smoke rising from that location in those same early morning hours. Then records showed Ferguson getting a rideshare back to Grand Prairie. On January 14th, authorities arrested Ferguson on kidnapping charges based on the phone records placing him at key locations, but they still didn't have Kayla's body. They had a burned car, suspicious items in his vehicle, digital evidence placing him at multiple crime scenes, but they needed to find her. Investigators kept digging into the cell phone data. They traced Ferguson's movements on the night of January 10th into the 11th. The phone pings led them to a specific area in Grand Prairie, a wooded section less than half a mile from where Ferguson lived with his wife. On January 18th, 2023, Tanger Ranger Thomas Fitzpatrick and Detective Joshua Duncan led a search team into those woods.
It was in this wooded area where the search for 33-year-old Kayla Kelly came to an end. An answer to questions, though not the answers so many had hoped for.
What they found ended the search but shattered any remaining hope. Kayla's body was in a shallow grave, approximately 1 to 2 feet deep, buried face down and nude. She'd been there for 8 days. The discovery location was critical. Remember those texts Ferguson sent to Kayla Stone? The one saying, "Baby, where you at?" Those messages were time-stamped and geolocated. They came from the exact spot where her body was buried, sent while Ferguson was literally standing over her grave. The charges on Ferguson were upgraded to include murder and arson.
And we want to stay in Collin County because there's been a major new development in the death of Kayla Kelly. Tonight, prosecutors added murder to the kidnapping and arson charges already filed against the main suspect. Police discovered Kelly's body in Grand Prairie, less than a mile from Ocastra Ferguson's home. Court documents reveal Kelly and Ferguson met online and dated for months, but Ferguson was going by a different name, and only recently did Kelly discover he was married. The documents say she threatened to tell his wife about the affair.
Collin County authorities confirm a woman's body found last night in Grand Prairie was that of missing McKinney woman Kayla Kelly. Hello, everybody. I'm Heather Hayes.
And I'm Steve Eager. It's 9 o'clock. We're expecting upgraded charges for the man already in jail for kidnapping and arson charges. Kelly's body was found in a shallow grave late last night, less than a mile from where the suspect, Ocastra Ferguson, lives. Collin County Sheriff's Office says Kelly and Ferguson were dating, but he gave her a fake name and told her he wasn't married. She'd only recently learned he was and was lying. Fox 4's spoken with the sheriff this afternoon, Blake Hansen, live in Collin County at the Sheriff's Office. Blake.
As Stephen Heather, at last check, the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's Office still had Kelly's cause of death listed as pending. This as the sheriff here noted that they still have work left to do in this investigation. It was in this wooded area where the search for 33-year-old Kayla Kelly came to an end. An answer to questions, though not the answers so many had hoped for.
I live just right up the street, right in the neighborhood.
Sharon Brown visited the site Thursday afternoon. She brought flowers and 2 balloons. One she says she sent to Kayla.
From one sister to another sister, I wanted I wanted to know that she was not alone, that we are going to remember her, and we're sending up flowers to heaven in her name.
The Collin County Sheriff confirms Kelly's body was found in a shallow grave Wednesday night. We could see a dug-up area where investigators searched, though it's not clear that's where she was found. The sheriff's office hasn't said what led them to the Grand Prairie neighborhood, but it is less than a mile from the home of 32-year-old O'Caster Ferguson, the man the Collin County Sheriff's Office charged with Kelly's kidnapping and said Thursday remains at the center of this investigation, though he has not been charged with murder.
We're not at the point that charging decisions will be made. There's additional work that needs to be done by both my investigators and the Texas Rangers. They'll continue to work together on this homicide investigation.
Ferguson is facing a new charge of arson, which investigators say is for burning Kelly's vehicle, discovered last week burned beyond recognition on a deserted Frisco road.
Just let me say this. This is truly a tragedy. Okay, we had hoped for a different outcome. And like her family, we were devastated when it ended up that we found her body.
The positive identification of Kelly's body brings to an end the more than week-long search for the Collin County woman. Court documents say Kelly and Ferguson were in a relationship, and she had just recently discovered he was married and had given her a fake name. While law enforcement are reluctant to share many other details of the case, they say they are far from done with the investigation.
Make no mistake, you murder a 33-year-old young lady and put her in a shallow grave, we're going to seek justice.
The sheriff's office has indicated that we may learn additional information through new court documents, and some of those may come out if and when additional charges are filed.
The case against him was building, piece by piece. No DNA evidence was recovered from the burial site, no murder weapon was found, but the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. The digital trail, the purchases he made, the location data, the text from the gravesite, and his inconsistent statements to police all pointed to one person. Ferguson's defense team, led by attorney Edwin Bubba King, began preparing their strategy. They'd argue that the body was found in Tarrant County, which should negate Collin County's jurisdiction. They'd claim the evidence was insufficient to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt without direct forensic links like DNA. But prosecutors had something powerful. They had a timeline that was nearly impossible to explain away. Here's what they could prove. Kayla sent those exposing texts at 2:29 a.m. from her apartment. Within 2 hours, only her car and Ferguson's phone were left in the complex. Ferguson was tracked buying gas cans and lighters. His phone pinged at the wooded burial site. He sent alibi texts from that same location. He burned her car in Frisco. He took a rideshare back to Grand Prairie, and Kayla was never seen alive again. The trial began in May 2024 in Collin County's 199th Judicial District Court with Judge Angela Tucker presiding. Prosecutor Kaylee Gilman led the state's case, methodically laying out the evidence for the jury. One of the most damaging pieces of evidence were those 213 pages of text messages between Ferguson and 11 women. The defense objected, arguing relevance and hearsay, but the court allowed them in. These messages showed the extent of Ferguson's deceptions, his pattern of lying, and his ability to maintain multiple fabricated relationships simultaneously. His wife, Latrina Chandler, testified during the trial. Her testimony was complicated. She acknowledged his infidelity but defended aspects of his character, describing him as generous and involved in his Jamaican community. She even claimed there were external threats against Ferguson, mentioning a man with a gun, but investigators found her claims not credible. Ferguson chose not to testify during the guilt phase of the trial. This is his right, and prosecutors can't comment on a defendant's silence, but it meant the jury never heard his version of events during the critical portion where they'd determine if he was guilty of murder. The jury didn't need long to reach its conclusion. After just 1 hour of deliberation, they returned with a guilty verdict. The sentencing phase happened that same afternoon. This is when Ferguson finally spoke, but what he said strained credulity. He claimed he'd been kidnapped by 3 men who were connected to disputes involving Kayla and suggested these mysterious men were responsible for her death. There was zero evidence supporting this claim, and investigators had found no indication of any third-party involvement. But the jury wasn't buying that story. They sentenced Ferguson to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But Ferguson's legal team wasn't done. They filed an appeal which was heard by the Texas Fifth Court of Appeals. Attorney Edwin King raised the same arguments, challenged the venue, arguing that since the body was found in Tarrant County, Collin County didn't have proper jurisdiction.
I would never argue with jury verdicts, and I think based on the evidence that they heard, I think they resolved it in their minds reasonably quickly.
He exhibited the same behavior that we saw through all of those text messages. He is a liar, and he lied then, and he lied to police, and he lied on the stand.
He claimed the evidence was insufficient to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt without direct forensic proof. On August 19, 2025, the appeals court issued their decision. They affirmed the conviction on every point. On the venue issue, they ruled that prosecutors had proven by a preponderance of evidence that the assault occurred in Collin County, based on the cell phone data and the fact that Kayla was last seen alive at her McKinney apartment. On the sufficiency of evidence, the appeals court applied the standard from Jackson versus Virginia. They determined that viewing all the evidence in the light most favorable to the prosecution, any rational jury could have found Ferguson guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. They specifically noted that the medical examiner's homicide ruling, combined with the digital evidence and Ferguson's inconsistent alibis, was sufficient for conviction even without DNA or a recovered weapon. As of today, there are no further appeals noted in the record. Ferguson's conviction stands. He will spend the rest of his life in prison for what he did to Kayla Kelly. Let's think about what this case really represents. Ferguson wasn't some stranger who attacked Kayla randomly. He was someone she trusted, someone she'd been building a relationship with for months. He lied about his name, about being married, and about his entire identity.
Make no mistake, you murder a 33-year-old young lady and put her in a shallow grave, we're going to seek justice.
The sheriff's words capture what this case is about. It's about a young woman whose trust was betrayed in the worst possible way. Kayla's cousin testified during the trial, and you have to imagine how devastating this was for her family. They watched her fall for someone who didn't exist. They warned her, had concerns, but she was an adult making her own choices. And then she was just gone. The wooded area where her body was found became a makeshift memorial. Sharon Brown, the resident who brought flowers, represented something important. She represented a community that recognized Kayla wasn't just a case number or a headline. She was a sister, a daughter, a friend, a colleague. She was someone who deserved to be remembered as more than just a victim. But here's what's important to understand, that this wasn't just about online dating going wrong. This was about a man who made deliberate choices. What do you think about this case? Do you also think Kayla should have taken her loss and moved on? Let me know what you think in the comments section. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.